Okay, and we are live. Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Record Live. For the eagle-eyed among you, you'll notice that I am not Jarrod. That Jarrod is sitting to the right of me, suspiciously quiet, as I hijack the camera. Look at me. I am the captain now. No, anyway, it's great to be with all of you this afternoon. Hello, Jarrod. Welcome back.
Jesse, thanks for having me. It's weird that you're hosting the show today, but I guess I'm the special guest. And it would be weird if I hosted and interviewed myself. So thank you for stepping in and helping us out today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I think some people might be amused to see you try and interview yourself. I think that could be a fun experience. It may not be the most sane experience, but it would certainly be fun for some people.
A Gollum sort of style. My precious.
So look, the reason why we're flipping the script today, and I also am very much aware that I haven't been on Record Live for a while, so it's good to be back. But the reason that we're doing this today is because this week we get to celebrate an anniversary that doesn't come around very often. That is 125 years of Adventist Record. It's quite, I think, difficult for most of us to think about many of the things that we consume every day in those terms. Like the first iPhone came out in 2007. You know, we update our computers and our phones and our clothing every year or so. So for the reason that we have this magazine here, Sneak Peek, by the way, 125 years is quite a significant anniversary. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk to you, Jarrod, a little bit about your experience as the editor for, I want to say, 7 years now, something along those lines.
I think it was 2016. Maths wasn't my strongest subject at school, which is why I went into writing. So I think that's almost 7 years.
Yeah. So look, there's something that I'm going to reference to, maybe a little bit, but maybe not. We only have about half an hour to talk. But if you have a chance, I was really quite inspired by checking out the SDA Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists. If you just Google that, you can find it. And Adventist Record has an entry. 125 years is right on there. The first, I believe, edition came out in 1898, I believe,
yep.
or 97.
98.
Say it. 98.
1898.
And since then, the magazine, well, it's been in many different forms. It's been sort of like a tract, an editorial, a magazine. It's grown, it's shrunk, it's gone in different ways as far as the frequency of release. But here we are 125 years later in a completely different world to the one in which the magazine was first founded. It's quite a privilege, I think, as I think of this, to be able to work with this magazine that has impacted the church for so long. So I guess that's probably a good place to start. You know, Jarrod, as the editor, you're part of a pretty large legacy. How do you feel about that legacy and your part in it, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a real humbling thing to look at 125 years. You know, in this disposable era that we live in, things get thrown out. They get manufactured to be thrown out quickly, so you'll buy more of them. And so for something to last, for a product or any kind of thing to last for 125 years is wild to think about, especially when for much of its lifespan, Record was, I mean, it's changed from fortnightly to weekly and different timings. At the moment it's fortnightly, but at a time it was weekly. So you think about how many in a year, there's 52 or 26 currently, but then you think about that times 125, there's been a lot of records come out. And, you know, the way I see it, I think you used the word stewarding at one point in our conversation, and I really see it as God's product. It's just that we're here stewarding it, for this time. We're honored and privileged to work on it. But it's so much of its DNA is in who's worked on it before and all the stories that have come from right around the church before. And then, looking forward, there will be others who work on it, year on, year out. There's new people writing, there's new submissions coming in, there's new staff here in the office, and it just keeps evolving and changing with the times. And it's really, I think it's a blessing that the church in this part of the world has such a magazine that, informs us, inspires us, keeps us all together as a community, because many divisions in the world don't have the same kind of thing that we have in Record. So I think it's a real blessing for us.
Yeah, that's a thing I was going to touch on, actually, because as you mentioned, not many divisions around the world have something like a Record. And so I guess if you could sum up what it is, the purpose that the Record kind of serves, I'm aware that, over the years that's probably changed. But I also, recognize that there are some certain elements that probably have stayed the same throughout the 125 years. So in your, Jarrod revised translation, what would that be for you if you could describe it?
Yeah, look, I guess it has evolved over the years with different editors and the church needing different things. So we've been looking back in this year, 125 years, we're looking back through the different eras, I suppose. We've broken it up into sort of 5-year blocks, and we're looking at different emphasis and different things that have come through. But for a very long time, at least in my memory of working with and alongside Record, actually in the mandate given to us by the division, it's to inform, to nurture, and to educate the church members. So to inform, to nurture, and to educate. That's very simple. It helps keep our job simple, We tell stories, we let people know what's going on, we help educate them, whether it's a faith-based version or whatever, and we nurture their faith. Each editor probably has a slightly different emphasis among those things. I remember James Standish used to say to inform, to inspire, and to irritate. He liked to make sure that people were in conversation, that people were not just swallowing everything. It wasn't a propaganda piece. It was actually an interesting and informative exercise in conversation. People were in conversation with each other that may have differing views. Our church has a broad spectrum of views and a broad spectrum of believers who think different things about different topics. And so remembering that those people are in the church. In terms of my own sort of emphasis, I've seen 2 important points that I've added to the inform, educate, and nurture. I think those 3 things are still a core of what we do, but I've added inspire. So I've had a number of people tell me stories about how they've read something even seemingly insignificant, a snippet or a short news piece in Record that has caused them to act. That's what I see. Inspiring is a doing word. So they're not only enjoying what they're reading, but they're inspired to take action. They're actually acting out that. And so I see that as a really important point. I remind people, when you tell a story about what God is doing in your church or your school or your local area, you could actually inspire someone else to try something similar in their community, right? So that's a really important function of Record as I see it. And the other one is to build community. I think Record's always done this, but I like to emphasize it because I like to remind myself that this is why we're here. Not only to remind people that we have a local church family that is really important in our lives, but also a wider division family. The SPD is quite a diverse and spread out division. And yet, I went to a GC session once and it was just wonderful to see how all the SPD people got along so well and gelled and had a real sense of camaraderie compared to some of the other divisions. We won't mention any names at this point, but it's just that sense of community, not only within our division, but also with the world church. We have some snippets in from time to time of what's happening in the Adventist world, in the Christian world beyond our borders. And I think it's helpful to have some of those things and remind ourselves that we are a global movement. We are a global church, and we're part of that legacy. For these 125 years, we've had our faith passed down from, faithful people, committed people doing amazing things. And Record continues to tell those stories and continues to give us that sense of connectedness. Much of Record in the past, as we're looking back through it, was letters or reports or updates from missionaries, out in wherever, within the SPD and beyond. They were reporting home. Throughout the wars, there's been Adventist men serving as medics or as whatever role they got given in the war, and writing back reports on even outreach during these terrible events, or just how they were faring. And that really brought the people at home together, because they could feel that sense of family. It's like a family email chain or something, a chat group, if we could say, in this day and age. It's what's my family up to? What are my brothers and sisters up to?
Yeah. No, that's good. There are two threads that I'd just like to tug on a little bit. And that first one is around the legacy idea, and the fact that we here at Adventist Media, and particularly those of us who write, we're part of this massive legacy of writing and of publication. It makes me think of, all the way back to the Millerite movements, where yes, you had big camp meetings and you had preaching and you had Bible studies, and those were very important. But the way that people actually found out, and the way that the movement really spread, was around printing and publications and tracts and magazines and newspapers. And then as you go into the 1860s and 1870s, when the Battle Creek printing press started, and James White obviously was such a huge herald of that, like the guy when it came to printing. What we're doing, even though a lot of the stuff that we print nowadays doesn't end up on the paper, a lot of it ends up online or on social media or what have you, but we're still part of that wider legacy of printing and publication, which is part of a tricky conversation as well, because there has been continued conversations in the last few years about the role of print media and the role of the written word on the page versus on a blog post or whatever. How have you been processing that as the editor of this print medium?
Well, I guess where you started is that we're on the shoulders of giants. It's good to remember that legacy and to honor that legacy, that print has been an important part of the growth of the church in this part of the world, and continues to be. I guess my take on that is always that I want, even yourself, Jesse, as an associate editor of mine, I want you to achieve more than I can ever achieve with communications for the church, with media for the church. So my role in some senses is as a caretaker at the moment, to make things grow and expand and multiply in areas that God wants them to. So, I mean, when I started at Record, just as a real junior, I've done every job. I joke to people that I've done every job at Record. I've done the obituaries, I've done the flashpoints, I've done the snippets, I've done the features, the letters, the news. I've done it all. I don't want to give away my age at this point, but I've been here for a while, doing this for a while. And so, I see that and I go, when I started, I think you said, when did you say the iPhone was developed? 2007?
I think it was 2007, somewhere around
2007, 2007 when I started at Record, so I've been here since smartphones have existed, so there has been a lot of change. When I started, I don't think we had much, if any, of a website. And so it was all paper-based. All the archives had to be accessed by paper if people were looking for things. Or there was a database that the GC had for the archives, but we didn't have our own website at that time. If you look at the past few years, expanding into, we're making videos now. We made a video for our offering this Sabbath, May 6th. We've got a video out for people to play in their churches and to engage with the record that way. Social media platforms, all of those, many of them didn't exist when we started, when I started working at Record. And so I think the key is not to be afraid of that, but to grow the message and grow the medium as many ways as we can, to look for, I think our pioneers looked at print as a very valuable medium because it was the technology of the day. And I don't think they would shy away from getting onto new platforms and doing new things like this that we do every week, this interview, Record Live. It's a new medium. It's a live broadcast streamed platform that we can have great conversations with guests around the world. It's not something that we had the technology to do. Even when I started, it wouldn't have been that easy to do. And so it's very much an evolving thing, but I don't think that means that print is necessarily any less valuable. Its role might change somewhat, but it doesn't lose its value because it is a physical thing. There's something about reading, when you sit on an airplane, you pick up the in-flight magazine and you flick through it. When you're sitting in church, Record's kind of like the in-flight magazine. It's your menu for, do you know what I mean? It's got that sort of physicality to it, that presence. For Signs magazine as well, which I also work with, and has an even longer sort of history in this country than Record does. The conversation comes up, is print redundant? Is it dying out? Can we do more things? There's something about having a piece of literature going into someone's home that they can read at their leisure, that the algorithms won't show them, that we can't necessarily get in front of them if we're not sharing literature in that way. So I think there's still a role for literature, but of course we're looking at how can we effectively share the message with as many people as possible. One amazing development of technology is that many people in the islands now have smartphones. So while it's exorbitantly expensive to ship Record printed magazines to them, they actually can access all of our news and features and things on their smartphone if they've got any data. So that's a really good development as I see it. They can connect with us on Facebook. They can get the latest stories. We're only able to expand and to reach different audiences because of the new technology. And I think that's a helpful thing.
No, that's good. There's some good food for thought there. The other thread that I wanted to tug on was around the irritation, or perhaps the community part of it. Now, for those of us who are in the office, a part of this is unveiling. We're kind of peeking behind the curtain. We're off the record on an official live stream. So dissonance, don't worry about it. But one of the things that I have definitely noticed working in this office is that it's not a one-way street when it comes to communication. We're not just talking to the church. In many cases, the church is talking back to us. And some letters are really helpful and encouraging, and others are a little bit more challenging. So I don't know how much you want to mention that, but I think it's important that people kind of recognize, this is actually, we're open to the conversations that you want to bring to our table.
I often encounter the perception that we're like inundated with letters or emails or comments. We don't necessarily always get that much feedback on some things that we put out. So we do get a steady stream of things, and I've never been afraid of putting out things that I disagree with in the letters section. Just because it's in letters doesn't mean I personally endorse it, but I think it's valuable to recognize that not every one of us is going to agree. and that it's important to share different perspectives in record. The crazies do write in, some people who have like claimed prophetic visions or strange, unintelligible. There are letters on the page, but they don't make any sense. We get that from time to time. We get people from all different sides of the spectrum, and I think that's a good thing to foster conversation, because it's their church too. I want people to feel a sense of ownership of the church, and Record is a place where they can contribute. Many people I meet think they can't send news from their church because it might not be worthy of Record, or they can't send their features or their articles because maybe it's not, good enough. And I say, well, let us be the judge of that. We can help you get it edited up, get it over the line. Just send it in. There's a place for everyone in Record. Without people submitting, we wouldn't have the magazine that we do, because Record has always been a relatively small team in a relatively large and fast spread division. So we don't have the ability to be at every church event. We don't have to be at every single thing. With telephone, with internet, people can shoot us stories, photos, news tips with great ease the next day or the same day as the event, and we can work on getting that up online and in the magazine. And it's a real good opportunity to have roving Record reporters all throughout the church in this division.
There you go. That's a fantastic challenge, I think, for anybody who's watching or listening to this. Just because you live in, Springfield, whatever, you don't have to be in the big cities or be a part of a massive church or, be witness to an incredibly consequential event to be a submitter. You can share your thoughts with us, your theological, philosophical ideas, and always open for that. So I think that's a really fantastic challenge. I want to quickly spend some time, potentially as much as you want to, on some of the history of Record. And I'm not an expert by any means, and whether it's more recent history or more far-flung history, are there any pieces of history or the story of the Record that are particularly interesting or inspiring to you, Jarrod?
I think one thing that really interests me, we used to have some awards that we called the Hinson Awards, and we don't do it at the moment. That's more of a time management and a platform to put them out. They were in conjunction with some other events that were happening, and those haven't happened for a little while. But it's not something that I wouldn't mind. Like, I'd like to resurrect that idea. But Anna Hinson was one of the first editors of Record. She was a woman, which was rare for the time, and she was the longest serving editor of Record. I think she was Record editor all up for about 28 years, plus a couple of years as an assistant editor or working with others who were usually church leaders. So they were the church president or something, and then she would be, I imagine, knowing how Record works, doing much of the work, but just letting them take the masthead label. And I think that's great that Record had that, at the same time Ellen White was around in Australia, there was also a female editor of Record. One thing about the history that people sort of don't know is that, I still get people that I meet that think I'm based in Melbourne or in Warburton in Victoria. I guess that's more recent history, but we've been in Wahroonga, based at the Adventist Media building across from the division for about 15 years or something now. It's 13 years it would be. So it's been a significant amount of time, but it's funny how many people you meet and still don't quite know how that happened. So we still get printed in Warburton. And hats off to our friends at Signs Publishing, our team down there who still faithfully print record each issue. But yeah, we're based in Sydney now. And I guess some of those transitions have been interesting. I didn't realize that it wasn't always in Melbourne. It actually had been in Wahroonga many, many years ago. So it's gone between Melbourne and then to Wahroonga and then to Warburton for many, many years and then up to Sydney again. So yeah, it's had a few transitions through its history. I guess they're the main things. I guess apart from, you know, the obvious stuff that everyone will have noticed, adding platforms, going from black and white to color, that was a sort of big event. Things like that. You know, it's been changing and evolving. I guess the other thing that I'd encourage some people to do is just pick any record, like go to the archives. You can get a link on our website to go back to the archives. And there's just some fascinating history. Like pick a date that interests you, you know, the year your grandparents were born, or when one of the world wars was on, World War I, World War II, even Vietnam, some of those. And we're looking back from time to time at some of these stories. And whenever I read, it doesn't matter which issue of record I'm looking at, I find something fascinating in there. I just read a story yesterday about a guy who was writing about tattoos in the islands and how different men from different cultural groups could be identified by his seeing the tattoos in the distance. And he told the story about how all the missionaries left for the war. When they all come back, these men, many of the men had tattooed their brand on them. So they all had SDA tattoos.
Wow.
There was another guy in the group who had a different church tattooed on him. And the missionary reflected that this was maybe suspicious, but then he found out that the guy had converted across and was passionately Seventh-day Adventist.
Wow.
And, you know, it was interesting.
Say, it would be awkward if you were a Methodist and then suddenly you became an Adventist and, oh no, I've got a Methodist tattoo. Oh, what am I going to do?
Well, this guy just carried on, but the missionary who was writing said that he was passionate about sharing what he'd learned with his former brothers and sisters in the other faith. And so, you know, you'd think this was quite a long time ago, you know, and you'd think you have this perception that he would have put in a comment somewhere about the badness of tattoos, like tattoos are wrong, tattoos are bad. His actual conclusion of that article was very interesting. He talked about how Jesus in Isaiah, it talks about him carrying the marks of, you know, his persecution, his death on his flesh.
Right.
And he talked about these men as wanting to carry the marks of their faith on their flesh. And
wow,
he stopped short of endorsing tattoos, but he did. I just found it a really interesting look at, you know, culturally, a lot of things were different. When we read the record back in those days, there's a lot of things we may not say the same way, or it wouldn't fly today. But a lot of it is very interesting in terms of the attitudes they had. Have we changed in some ways? Yes. In some ways, not at all. Many of the things are still the same. There's still the same conversations we're having. There's still the same things we're concerned about. There's still the same ways we're discussing topics in different language, perhaps on different platforms, obviously, but still some of the same things that we're interested in. So yeah, it's a fascinating exercise, and I'd encourage anyone, if you get a bit of time, you're a bit of downtime, you're a bit bored, you want to have an interesting some entertainment. There's some really funny stuff in there as well. They had senses of humor, these former Adventists that went before us. You know, we often, yeah, I know, we often think, that it's always been a church paper that's been fairly serious and whatever contained, and yet there was some hilarious little stories and anecdotes that they would include that just, yeah, it brings a smile to your face when you're reading them.
No, Fantastic. Yeah, and I think it's important that we engage with our history. I think it's important that we understand where we've come from and the shoulders upon which we stand, whether you're an editor of the record or whether you're just a church member doing your thing in your part of the world. We're getting to the end of our time here, Jarrod. Is there any burning, anecdotes or challenges or things that we haven't touched on yet as it pertains to record that you'd like to talk about?
I think the thing that I've noticed, Jesse, and looking back through the records, is the commitment to mission, the passion for mission. That is strong. And you could almost say on every page of record, there's this burning sense of a conviction for mission. I've been saying it's in our DNA. This mission, as Adventists, it's in our DNA, but in Record's DNA as well. They're one and the same, the church's DNA and the DNA of Record. You can see that common thread going through. And I'd encourage us, not to lose that. Do we have a mission mindset today in our lives, in your local church, in your family? Are you looking for opportunities to share Jesus' love with other people? That's a lesson that I'm learning through looking back at Record and going, hey, the people that went before us, they had a burning desire to share Jesus with the world. And do I have that in my life? I get caught up in all sorts of things. We're busy working for the church, or we're just living our lives. And it's like, do I have that drive and that passion for mission? The other thing I would say is this weekend is the record offering, which I think we've mentioned, but yeah, I'd really encourage you to look at our video, to download it and play it in your churches. If you see this before then, if you see it after, you can still donate. All year, if you find the record offering on the e-giving website, you can always put an offering in there. But yeah, encourage people to support Record and to keep it going. I'm putting the links in the chat, so you guys can do that. And yeah, I'd say let's keep going. Let's keep sharing the stories of what God is doing in the South Pacific. I often tell people, I'll just give you one last sort of thing, Jesse. People are often shy about sharing things for Record. They think either the quality won't be good enough. Well, that's what we've got editors for. We can help you brush up the quality. But also they think there's a certain humility, or Christian humility, that they think, I shouldn't share this because I'm putting myself up on a pedestal. I'm putting myself out there and my story and my
like a tall poppy thing almost.
Yeah, bit of that. And I always say to those people, well, it's not your story, it's God's story. What is God doing in your community? What is he doing in your life? What is he showing you? What is he revealing? And if you share those stories, other people can be inspired by them. So don't keep them to yourself. Make God look good, even if it makes yourself look bad. Be authentic, put it out there as you need to. But God wants to use those stories to inspire other people. So don't be afraid to share your stories with us. We're always welcoming of those. So yeah, if you're watching this and you've had a desire or a passion to write about a certain topic, feel free to reach out. If you have something happening in your local church, your local Adventist school, there's Adventist people that doing amazing, inspiring things, please send us those stories. We'd love to have them.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And just to reiterate, download the download the video. If you are part of a local church, your tech team, make sure that they play it. Make sure that there's somebody to highlight the record offering this coming Sabbath, if you're watching this live or before this Sabbath. Otherwise, keep participating, sending in letters, contributing in whatever part of the mission field you find yourself in. And I just want to say as well, thank you, Jarrod, for your leadership and for leading this team here, and for being a faithful servant in this space. And here's to many more years of Adventist Record. We'll check back in 125 years and see where things are at.
Hopefully in heaven. Hopefully the New Jerusalem.
I was going to say, you and I will probably be in our 170s by then, but we'll be fine.
Sounds good, Jesse. And I've put that link for the Vimeo. On Vimeo, you can download it. But if you go to our Facebook or our website, you can find that video and you can find links at where you can download that video. So, yeah, thanks, Jesse, for stepping in. Zanita's doing another interview this afternoon, and we miss her, and hopefully we'll see her again soon. But, yeah, really appreciate you jumping in this afternoon.
Love it. Love it. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
God bless. See you then.